Thank you very much. Good morning again. And I'm happy to chair the first opening session for today's dialogue. We have excellent panel, 7 panelists, and we are going to talk about, as just introduced, Commemorative Summit and Future of ROK-ASEAN relations. This is very important pre-event. It's happening now of actually commemorating the summit meetings. Let me introduce panelists one by one. Rastam MOHD ISA, the far to the right. He's a chairman and the chief executive, Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia, from Malaysia. And CHUNG Hae-moon, he's a former Secretary General, ASEAN-Korea Center, ROK. And Mr. Khamsouay KEODALAVOng, he's Director General, Institute of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lao PDR, right? Laos, from Laos, yeah. And Pou SOTHIRAK, he's executive, Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. He's from Cambodia. And don't make me get confused. He's Kim Hyung Jun. I'm Joon Hyung. So he's a professor at Kangwon University. And TRAN Viet. He's a Deputy Director General, Institute for Foreign Policy and Strategic Studies, Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. And the last but not least, Kasira CHEEPPENSOok, Miss. Okay, thank you. Deputy Dean, Faculty of Political Science, and Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. As you realize, I actually in my speech I said track 2, but some of it is working at track 1, so we should call it 1.5, so we can have live discussions from very responsible person and with expertise. 7 people. We are going to give 10 minutes for presentation for each presentation, and then we are going to discuss some important issues. And I really want to give the chance, the floor, to ask questions. Especially, I'm expecting very active Q&A sessions, especially from students. Okay, we're starting with Mr. Rastam MOHD ISA.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Kim. First, I'd like to thank the Korean National Diplomatic Academy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for inviting us to this important forum. I've had the honor and privilege of actually being involved in one way or another with the various commemorative summits. I was actually SOM leader for Malaysia during the 2009 commemorative summit, and I was invited by the Foreign Ministry to participate in a forum in Jeju in 2014, and now I'm here for this forum, and I really feel privileged in this regard. We're looking at the future of ASEAN and Korea relations, and if we look back, I think there is one important coincidence of events that occurred in 1991. I know we look back at ASEAN-Korea relations, we go back to 1989 when the sectoral dialogue partnership first began. And then it was, of course, upgraded to a dialogue partnership in 1991. But if you recall, 1991 was also the year when Korea became a member of the United Nations. And the member countries of ASEAN, 6 member countries of ASEAN then supported this initiative or this effort by Korea, and eventually both Koreas joined the United Nations at the same time. To me, when one wishes to look at the future of Korea-ASEAN relations, I think we need to look at the present strategic environment as well. I think this summit that is going to take place in Busan comes at a time when the global strategic environment is such that there's a lot for us, I mean for Korea and ASEAN to think about, not only now but also for the future. First, let us look at US-China relations. It is inevitable that when one looks at relations amongst ourselves, we need to bear that in mind, that in the context of the global strategic environment and regional strategic environment, you have the relations between China and the United States in mind, given that there is the trade war, given that there is competition, especially for us in Southeast Asia. This is very, very important. And also for you here in Northeast Asia, the United States is an ally of Korea. The United States is also a treaty ally of 2 of the ASEAN member states. But at the same time, we see the rise of China. We see, as this is especially apparent recently, when China celebrated the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. So China's position in the world, I think, is also a factor that needs to be taken into consideration, because China has also, as we know, begun to be active not only in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, but also in the rest of the world. Initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative and other initiatives that China has taken to engage ASEAN needs to be taken into account as background for this purpose. Then I would say that the role of other major powers and middle powers like Korea would be very important. This is where I think ASEAN and Korea can work closely together for the future. Let me now look at the current state of affairs in the sense that whilst we have the major power relations in the background, we also have issues that are of concern to us. Of course, the issues in the Korean Peninsula, the issues regarding North Korean nuclear activities, issues regarding activities in the South China Sea. These are all important issues for us to think about. We have the present regional architecture, whereby it is essentially ASEAN-led. Let us put aside for the time being the military alliances that the United States has with countries in the region. But for purposes of looking at Korean-ASEAN relations, I think we should be looking at the ASEAN-led or ASEAN-centered regional architecture, which brings us to the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum, the ADMM and ADMM+, and so on. So I think the future of ASEAN-Korea relations need to be pursued in that context. Now, what should that regional architecture be like for now and the future? As we can see, architecture means a unifying or coherent form of structure. And this region badly needs that, given the situation that I've described above. So I think questions of peace, development, questions of norms and values, the need for mutual respect of one another's position, adherence to the basic principles of the United Nations, and for many of us in South Asia, also the principles of non-alignment, or the Bandung principles, and of course other relevant principles. Respect for international law, free and fair trade, open regionalism, inclusivity. These are all the principles that I think need to guide us in our relations for now and the future. There are a number of future issues that I believe should be considered when we look at relations between Korea and ASEAN. There has to be a holistic approach to these issues. These are issues that eventually will be driven by considerations not just economic in nature, not simply trade, investment, business, and finance, but there are other issues that I think we can work together on. Issues such as development of the digital economy. It is inevitable that this era is upon us now. Issues such as the fourth industrial revolution and technology. This is where ASEAN will still continue to look at Korea as an important partner. Issues such as data protection. This is really very important for the future economy. And one important area, of course, is infrastructure development. There is a major requirement for infrastructure development in the region, and as we understand it, and as we know it, ASEAN has got its master plan for ASEAN connectivity. APEC itself has got a connectivity blueprint, and I'm sure Korea and ASEAN can work together in this regard. This is where the new Southern policy comes into play in that regard. I think it is also important to consider the issues relating to the environment, climate change, sustainability. The achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is an important objective for all of us, and it is certainly very important for most of the countries in ASEAN, given the fact that there are differing levels of development. The non-traditional security issues are those that I think need to be given due attention. Therefore, these would require multilateral approaches in the context of the regional architecture that I mentioned above, but at the same time, there are certainly avenues and areas where I believe ASEAN and Korea can work together. Now, Mr. Chairman, I come to essentially my last point. I think it has been said, and you yourself, Chancellor, has mentioned this, about the concern that has been expressed, especially by many of us in ASEAN, about the kinds of policies that emanate from Seoul. Now we have the new Southern policy. We know that in the past there have been other policies espoused by previous administrations and presidents. I think what is required is eventually a long-term and enduring approach to these issues through whatever policy that is pursued by different leaders and different administrations. It is fine that, as you have mentioned, ASEAN and Korea has this, or rather have this privilege of having the commemorative summit every 5 years. But this shouldn't be, I think, shouldn't be the time frame when, we're looking at different policies. It should be beyond that period of 5 years. So I think what is important is that such policies are pursued eventually with peace, development, and prosperity for the region in mind. The other point, I think that we need to remember that relations should encompass all aspects, whether it is based on the 3 pillars of the New Southern Policy, or for that matter, the 3 pillars of the ASEAN Community Vision. So it should encompass the political and security aspects, should encompass, of course, the economic aspects, at the same time, the social, cultural aspects. And I think these are the issues that are being looked at by both sides and expected to be discussed by the leaders in Busan. And the other point, I believe that for us in ASEAN, it is very important that we continue to rely on the support of Korea as well as the other dialogue partners for ASEAN centrality, and especially now also in the context of what's going on, this debate between the Asia-Pacific and Indo-Pacific, I think support and endorsement for the ASEAN outlook for the Indo-Pacific is also very important. And at the same time, the ASEAN-centered architecture that I've mentioned. Of course, that regional architecture is an evolving regional architecture. We can work together, Korea and ASEAN, to provide further inputs to ensure that eventually this region remains peaceful, it remains stable, it remains a region where development can continue unhindered by either major power competition or worse, conflict that would create unnecessary misery and problems for all of us in the region. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think it's a really nice way to open up the sessions. It touches a lot of important various issues, like relations with the great powers, and the issue areas like denuclearization in South China Sea, and non-security issues. And he also expressed concerns about reactions from ASEAN countries. Actually, I heard whenever I visited ASEAN countries, first question is not again, oh, you have a new idea, how it's gonna continue. That kind of little cynicism, but you know, as a architect of this policy, even though I think concern is legitimate, but at the same time, we have some kind of consistency, even though it's different names. So I think is ASEAN, the status and necessity of cooperation between us and ASEAN is has been increasing. So we should not discount that part. Okay, thank you very much. And second presenter will be CHUNG Hae-moon, Professor CHUNG Hae-moon, please.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Kim. I think at your opening address, you did set the tone and stage for our discussions. Thank you very much. As a person who has invested a lot of years in dealing with issues pertaining to ASEAN-Korea partnership and also issues pertaining to Southeast Asia, I believe I can safely characterize the current status of relations between Korea and ASEAN as a mutually beneficial, multifaceted, multidimensional, and multi-layered relations. And Korea-ASEAN have cooperated wonderfully in the bilateral level as well as ASEAN-led multilateral levels, in particular at the ASEAN Regional Forum. Rather than going over the progress by one over the last 30 years, let me just say that Korea and ASEAN have cooperated excellently at all the 3 important dimensions that are social that are political security arenas and economics arenas and the socio-cultural arenas. Even if we have done a lot to improve the quality of cooperation over the last 3 decades, we still have much room to improve what we have done for the last 3 decades. Let me just list a couple of things where we need to put additional focus on. First, we need to together address traditional and non-traditional threats to regional peace and security. We need to pursue further liberalization and upgrading of the ASEAN-Korea FTA. And we need to help to strengthen cooperation through the ASEAN Smart Cities Network to help enhance the connectivity ASEAN-wide. And Korea is continuing to support ASEAN's efforts to deepen economic integration, including the effective implementation of the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity 2025 and the Initiative for ASEAN Integration Work Plan 3, with a focus on narrowing development gaps within ASEAN. And also, Korea needs to support for ASEAN to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution. Okay? And some of you may be wondering what might be the significance of the conference we are holding today. I think I can elaborate on several elements that may indicate the significance of today's conference. First, I believe this will be an opportune time for both sides to review the relationship and set mutually beneficial goals for the partnership moving forward. And it is equally important for both sides build upon the current momentum and seize new opportunities and tap into potential to further strengthen the ASEAN-Korea strategic partnership. And the adoption of the ASEAN-ROK joint vision statement for peace, prosperity, and partnership to chart directions to further strengthen the strategic partnership. Another one will be a joint statement that will be expected to be adopted by the leaders to advance ASEAN-ROK cooperation in the years to come. And another element is Korea's continuous commitment to support ASEAN centralities in the evolving regional architecture. And also, it marks a very important milestone in terms of the new Southern policy taking a solid root as a result of this summit. And this summit will be also able to generate a new momentum for strengthened cooperation between Korea and the Mekong regions. And now I would like to touch upon the subject of what should be the priorities for the future development of the partnership. First, Korea needs to continue to support ASEAN in realizing the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Second, Korea needs to support for ASEAN developing the capacity of ASEAN MSMEs and collaborating together to transform ASEAN into digital-driven economies. Third, Korea's continued support and cooperation in enhancing regional connectivities and narrowing the development gaps among ASEAN member states, including through the implementation of MPAC 2025 and the IAI Work Plan 3. And fourth, Korea's contribution to enhance connectivities in ASEAN, including through the ASEAN Smart City Network and the initiative on technical and vocational education and training. And also we need to explore joint projects or activities that will be designed to promote people-centered and people-oriented approach. And Chancellor Kim elaborated the strategic environment surrounding the partnership between Korea and ASEAN at his opening remarks. I would like to make some suggestions, or I would like to share some lessons as we move forward toward the post-summit implementation stages. I think Korea-ASEAN have common interest in underscoring the importance of multilateralism and regionalism and international law in contributing to global and regional peace and stability and prosperity. So Korea and ASEAN needs to cooperate to protect and enhance the value of regionalism and multilateralism. I think we believe we have common interest. This is a very important element, I would say. The second point I would like to raise with you in this regard is for Korea and ASEAN to continuously champion the free trade order worldwide and region-wide. Because Korea and ASEAN have a great beneficiaries of free trade system over the last 3 decades. We continue to need to uphold the free trade system, not only regionally, but also, worldwide. And the fourth element is that at the time when there are strains in major power relations, probably between the US and China, there is more need for medium and small states to work together actively to maintain peace, stability, and development in the region. Fifth element I would like to emphasize is how to apply the ASEAN community building experience and know-how to Northeast Asia and eventually and subsequently to the broad East Asia. Because for the last 3 decades, for the last 5 decades, ASEAN has accumulated a lot of know-how and experiences essential to building community in Northeast Asia, as well as in the wide East Asia. So Korea and ASEAN needs to come together to talk about how the two sides can cooperate to help build the community economic integration in Northeast Asia as well as in the wider East Asia. And also, every year we have Korea-ASEAN security dialogue that is named the Seoul Dialogue. But that is done between the vice ministerial level of defense. I think Korea and ASEAN needs to upgrade the ASEAN-Korea defense dialogue to the ministerial level. According to what I know, ASEAN has established ASEAN Plus, ADMM Plus. But in addition to ADMM Plus, you have a bilateral channel between ADMM Plus 1. So those ADMM Plus 1 includes countries like US, Japan, and China. I think Korea and ASEAN can upgrade the Seoul dialogue to the ministerial level. So I really hope that this summit, the commemorative summit between Korea and ASEAN, and also the first summit between Korea and Mekong will be an occasion, an opportunity to open up new space for cooperation, friendship between Korea and ASEAN on the one hand, and between Korea and the Mekong on the other hand. So I hope that today's session, today's conference, will be able to provide a lot of food for thought on how to contribute to making the two conferences, a monumental conference, a great success. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chunh Hae-moon. As you, I think you sensed it, he has such a diverse experience in diplomatic areas. Actually, his career is including East Asia, North America, Europe, and Africa, and he has such a big good knowledge of ASEAN country. It's really helpful to for us to have this kind of presentation. And he talked about the priority of Korea-ASEAN in the future, especially deepened relations between bilateral relations. And especially he talked about people-centered approach, and also importance of regionalism and multilateralism. We can discuss about, actually I'm a big fan of the multilateralism, but as you can see, the situation is not really favorable to multilateralism, especially between the strategic competition between the US and China. I think this can be a big issue for discussion later. And next presenter will be Mr. Khamsouay KEODALAVONG from Laos. Please.
Chancellor of the KNDA, and today we have the first for the launching of the ASEAN-Korea think tank strategic studies. First of all, I would like to thank you for the host as the Korean MOFA and the Korean National Diplomatic Academy for organizing this seminar to provide a unique opportunity to share our views and think tank or academias on the future of ASEAN-ROK relations. I also, this opportunity also provide me the chance to come back to visit Korea after I left Korea early this year, after 9 months. And as we are aware of now, the ROK is one of the important dialogue partners of ASEAN, so has significantly contributed to the cause of the ASEAN community building. Now, ASEAN focuses on the strengthening of the ASEAN community through the implementation of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. And of course, the ROK remains committed to support ASEAN in this regard. This signifies the strong and the continued commitment to as well as the political views of the ROK toward ASEAN member states and ASEAN as a group. ASEAN and the Republic of Korea are immediate neighbors and share similarities in terms of culture. We have shared identity as seen by the establishment of the ASEAN Culture House by the Korea Foundation in Busan. And on this, I also would like to raise the AKC, also ASEAN Korea Center, also work hard to promote and to support the ASEAN and Korea relation up to now. This is concrete evidence. Moreover, we have the mutual understanding which is called Asia, and we should promote the value of Asia. ASEAN-ROK relations have been so far with the to a lot of achievement, thanks for many important factors, but the most important one is the shared identity, geographical proximity to the two factors of our two sides, ASEAN and Korea. This year, as we all aware that the Korea will host the commemoration of the summit in Busan as the ASEAN-ROK dialogue relation. Thus, in this important opportunity for the ASEAN and ROK to promote public awareness of ASEAN-ROK relations, and at the same time, the chart of the future direction of the ASEAN-ROK relations. Distinguished participants and panelists, ASEAN-ROK relation has been established with solid foundation and mechanism in place. However, amid of the complexity and uncertainty of the global politics and non-traditional security issues, ASEAN and ROK have the intensified cooperation through existing mechanism, and I wish to share some points as follows. Further enhance ASEAN-ROK strategic partnership into dynamic and mutual beneficial relations in order to better respond to the regional and global issues and opportunities. Invest more effort. ROK should invest more effort to advance the economic cooperation for shared prosperity between ASEAN member states or ASEAN as a group, and the ROK in the area of, among others, trade, investment, connectivity, and including through human resources development and sharing the best practices, and promote the visibility and the role of the ASEAN-ROK Center in order to promote ASEAN culture and tourism. Continue to provide the technical and financial support to the ASEAN in the area of sustainable infrastructure, connectivity, and digital innovation in the face of the fourth industrial revolution. And also strengthen ASEAN-ROK cooperation in the field of disaster management for the natural hazard. This is the significant area of cooperation of Laos. And I believe it is also important for other ASEAN countries also. I think most of us well know that during the last 2 years, Laos experienced a natural disaster, including the collapse of the southern dam of the CHEEPPENSOOK hydropower dam in the southern part of Laos, and floods and drought affected across the country. This disaster caused the loss of lives and properties. I therefore wish to take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks and from the ASEAN family and also the ROK for the assistance and support extended to Laos in the face of natural disaster. We should intensify our cooperation in this area also. Furthermore, people-to-people exchange, especially youth through education scholarship, entrepreneurship, and the volunteer program, so as to boost your involvement in our cooperation as there will be successors generation. Continue to support ASEAN effort in narrowing the development gaps within the ASEAN, especially new members of ASEAN. ASEAN community will be strong and resilient when the member states together are resilient. After this, I do have to agree to the first two speakers talking about the long story of the ASEAN up to now is 30 years. And also in the future, how we do have to elevate and make closer cooperation with ASEAN and ROK. I thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khamsouay KEODALAVONG. You mostly talked about the implication of 30 years anniversary of Korea and ASEAN relations, and he also talked about coming in the middle of uncertainties of global politics, not only economic area and culture, but also we need to enhance the strategic cooperations. And I also want to take this opportunity to express my deepest condolence to Laotian people for collapsing them in this tragic incident. I hope they recover quickly from the tragedy. Thank you very much. And the next presenters will be Mr. Pou SOTHIRAK, and Executive Director, Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. Please, yeah.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to each and every one of you. First and foremost, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to His Excellency Dr. Kim Jung Hyun, Chancellor of this prestigious institute, the Korean National Diplomatic Academy of the Republic of Korea, for hosting this important meeting and for extending a warm hospitality to all of us from overseas. I am asked to make some or to deliver some comment during this session 1. So please allow me to set out what I see, some of the issues that are currently at hand with regard to the 2019 commemorative summit that will take place in Busan in later November this year, and the future ROK-ASEAN relation. The 2019 representing another milestone year in the development of ASEAN-South Korea relations. ASEAN and the Republic of Korea will celebrate the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-ROK dialogue relations, with a commemorative summit to be held in Busan on 25th, 26th November. And precisely during that time, President Moon Jae-in is expected to deliver a keynote address based on the new Southern policy, which will herald a meaningful turning point regarding ASEAN-Korea relations. In my view, in order for this new Southern policy to be launched successfully and achieve its goal of elevating strategic cooperation between ASEAN member states and reinforcing the Republic of Korea participation in ASEAN-led mechanism, there must be a new consideration given to the articulations of the new Southern policy, vision, strategy, and the implementation schemes, taking into account the uncertainty and the insecurity that is now happening across the globe. The chair statement during the upcoming summit, in my view again, should have been written in such a way to avoid any ambiguity, to ensure that the vision as stipulated in the NSP can be implemented successfully in engaging ASEAN, taking into account the long-term perspective rather than opting for short-term gain. The high point of and the strength of the chair statement is in its delivery of a clear and impactful message that the current government of Korea is taking a truly proactive approach toward Southeast Asia, unlike the previous government. Moreover, this statement should importantly articulate all the commitment inscribed in the ASEAN Republic of Korea Plan of Action 2016-2020 related to political, security, economic, and social cultural cooperation will be implemented fully and swiftly in order to realize the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Noting the recent visit of President Moon to the region, particularly the three countries, Malaysia, Brunei, and Cambodia, I hope the summit will also address how the ROK New Southern Policy will operate within the context of the Greater Mekong sub-region. How will it be distinct from other extra-regional actor initiatives in the sub-region? What constraint will need to be addressed, particularly noting here that this area has been a playground of the US-China competition in recent years. The discussions of these issues is also most relevant to the November Mekong-Korea Summit in Busan. Of the utmost importance to mainland Southeast Asia in the context of the Mekong River is the demonstrations of the ROK commitment to the long-term sustainability of the river. This has been initially demonstrated through the design of the visions of the Mekong ROK Corporation and its action plan, which included people-centered development, sustainable, inclusive development, enhancing connectivity. To make the action plan more comprehensive, attention toward food, water, energy security, and other non-traditional threats, such as climate change in particular, and the broader environmental concern in general will be treated as a welcome sign to all the mainland Southeast Asia. Therefore, the ROK goodwill in advancing these efforts bode very well and are fully consistent with ASEAN aspiration in narrowing the development gap and speed up the regional integration among least developing states. On the broader questions of geopolitics, South Korea is a consolidated liberal democracy and long-standing allies to the US. Yet, the ROK is not a member of the Quad. How does this new Southern strategy relate to the role of the Quad in the region or to the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy? In light of South Korea's historical close tie to the United States, how will the new Southern policy be framed in the context of the US-ASEAN relation and the free and open Indo-Pacific? With regard to the prospect of the ASEAN-ROK relation, both sides would do well if they take into consideration some of the key points, of which I have a pleasure to highlight here. There should be a solid descriptions and explanation on how Korea intended to raise its tie with ASEAN to the same level as that of the four major powers. Thus, an unambiguous understanding as to what exactly Korea intended to upgrade the economic, political, and strategic relation with ASEAN to the same level as that of the major power will be useful to chase away any misunderstanding or unintended nuance. The new Southern policy should work to instill trust, mutual benefit and partnership, and this will lead, in my view, to a durable and sustainable cooperation. Korea should properly identify what exactly ASEAN need in terms of development cooperation. Any cooperation project that stimulate and improve ASEAN integration process in the political, security, economic, and social cultural field should be treated as a priority. The ROK government must ensure that the New Southern Policy is an open, transparent, and inclusive initiative, working in tandem with other country initiatives to assist ASEAN to achieve community building. Korea needs to position itself well in this context so as to avoid any competition with countries such as Japan and China. Rather, Korea would do well to avoid any duplication of any cooperation project that could seen as an obstacle to achieve lasting partnership with ASEAN, so as to allow the New Southern Policy to play its intended constructive role in facilitating the peace and prosperity in this region. Korea must build mutual trust and confidence with Japan and China while elevating ASEAN to the same level as the four major powers. In order for a peaceful and secure region to prevail, Korea must stand ready to fully committed to cooperate with other ASEAN partners as well through its ability to promote trust and confidence and chase away suspicion and misconception. Now I have my last point about ASEAN. There's so much about what we ask Korea to do, but I have one point for ASEAN, and many ASEAN colleagues are here as well. ASEAN have a vital interest in engaging both meaningfully and faithfully with Korea in developing ASEAN continued goal of peace and prosperity in this region. By decisively welcoming the New Southern Policy, ASEAN can look forward to expanding and strengthening in relationship with Korea through a stronger sense of continuity and consistency. In this regard, I certainly hope that ASEAN leader will declare unanimously in support of the New Southern Policy that is initiated by President Moon. I think this is very important because we hear already what President Moon and South Korea committed to ASEAN, but frankly speaking, ASEAN countries have not in one way or the other through public diplomacy do anything as yet. So I hope that being a think tank track 2 from ASEAN, I should recommend that ASEAN should also engage frankly and faithfully with this new initiative. And I think this new initiative will also provide a platform for a very successful ASEAN-ROK Commemorative Summit as well, the Mekong ASEAN Summit, ROK Mekong Summit as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pou SOTHIRAK. And he gave us a lot of valuable and insightful advice, especially for New Southern Policy. One point he made, it was actually really important. I think New Southern Policy should have clear vision and schemes, especially implementing methods, especially in this uncertainties of strategic environment surrounded us. And he also talked about stimulating recommendation for ASEAN country to do something in another way too. Because you brought the issue, so after all presentation, I want to raise 3 questions. So I want you to 7 panelists. You don't have to answer the 3 questions I raised, but first question is, what is the biggest obstacles and what is the biggest accelerators in promoting Korea ASEAN relations in the future? Because our theme is like that. So I want you to make a list, as specific as possible. Biggest obstacles and biggest accelerate. Second questions, actually I raised before, is multilateralism, can it succeed, especially in the situation of U.S.-China competition? Is it possible? Number three, and what actually he raised the ASEAN's role, but still I want to ask the ASEAN member countries what ASEAN really want Korea to do the most. And in that case, I think two Korean panelists don't have to answer that. So these are my questions after the completion of presentation. Hey, by the way, I forgot to say that our session time is extended to 12:30. It's bad news for your lunch, but don't worry about it. And some schedule change, so we have time until 12:30. And next presenter will be Professor Hyung Jun. Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you for the time, and yeah, it is my great pleasure to be here to talk with distinguished colleagues from Southeast Asia. I'm an anthropologist working on Indonesia. My presentation today will be confined to some socio-cultural field, so I'm not that used to political or security or something like that. So I will talk about some points about ROK-ASEAN socio-cultural relations, and I will suggest a very simple proposal for the promotion of our relations. So when we talk about socio-cultural relations between Korea and ASEAN, instantly we are thinking about rapid growth in human exchanges. Actually, while I prepare my presentation, I didn't check up the latest statistics. So I thought that the number of people-to-people exchanges between ASEAN and Korea might be 9 million or some 10 million. But I happen to know from the opening speeches that it already becomes about 11, and it will, next year it will be 12 million or 30 million. So it changes very quickly. It grows fast, and we cannot expect how much it will be in 5 years. So yes, we can easily find out a remarkable growth in human exchanges. But when we look at some other side of our relations, we can find out some different pictures. So, for example, when we examine history textbooks of Korea, and actually, we don't know exactly how much ASEAN should be represented in ASEAN countries, should be represented in history textbooks, but actually it is to me, it is improperly represented. So it is very difficult to find out contents related to ASEAN countries in history textbooks of Korea. And it also applies to history books of ASEAN countries about Korea. I just read some history books of Indonesia, and it is really difficult to find out contents related to Korea. We have some information on Korean War, but after that, the information is quite shallow. So in this sense, I think the people-to-people exchanges have been growing, but information about ASEAN countries in Korea and Korea in ASEAN country have not grown accordingly. So in this sense, the 30 years commemoration is a good chance for us to reflect upon the relations between ROK and ASEAN from some sociocultural point of view. So because there are so many people-to-people exchanges between ASEAN and Korea, so ASEAN is no longer a region foreign to Koreans. But the thing is that the understandings of Korea, understandings of ASEAN in Korean society, and how Koreans perceive ASEAN are not, to me, diverse enough. And while I was writing this, I thought about adjective, thick. So I think information and perceptions of ASEAN in Korean society are not diverse and thick enough to represent what ASEAN is. This may be ascribed partly to the rapid expansion of exchanges in a very short period of time. So Koreans have not had enough opportunities to question and reflect upon what are proper and systematic ways to approach, understand, and engage ASEAN. So the role in assisting Korean publics, Korean masses, to have in-depth understandings of ASEAN should be played, first of all, by Koreans, whether it be the government, academics, activists, and even ordinary citizens. But it should be noted that the role of ASEAN countries in promoting awareness of ASEAN to Koreans cannot be neglected. So to me, only when the efforts are made in bilateral way, these efforts may help to develop mutually beneficial relations. And the same can be applied to the position of Korea in ASEAN. In order to promote proper understandings of Korea and to seek ways of interacting with Koreans, efforts should be made not only by ASEAN countries, but also by Koreans. It appears that the unilateral efforts is not enough to promote mutually beneficial socio-cultural relations. So only when both sides, ROK and ASEAN, recognize the significance of each other, are aware of their interconnectedness, and are ready to work together bilaterally, the relations can be upgraded to the next level, where both citizens in Korea and ASEAN can fully appreciate constructive and beneficial coexistence of their neighbors and can engage with each other actively, voluntarily, and joyfully. So we are talking about the new Southern policy. So under this policy stance, one of the most important agendas to me should be to draw a consensus on the need to promote understandings of ASEAN in Korea and understandings of Korea in ASEAN. It should be appreciated and shared that the promotion of ASEAN in Korea and promotion of Korea in ASEAN can be the cornerstone for future ROK and ASEAN relations. Only on this basis we can deliberate on the direction of productive cooperation and the ways to broaden and deepen understandings of ASEAN in Korea and of Korea in ASEAN. When ASEAN is perceived, appreciated, and understood in a balanced and holistic way by Koreans and vice versa, concrete and brilliant measures for future development can be properly discussed and implemented. So these are the proposals actually which came from my experience. I have done research in Southeast Asia for the last 30 years. And I'm also, in that sense, I'm also have some responsibility that the information of ASEAN, history, culture, society of ASEAN have not properly transmitted to Korean public. Yes, so I'm also one of the factors which brought about this sort of current situation. But I think the Korean government have also made some effort to promote ASEAN, awareness of ASEAN among Koreans. But I think that's not enough. The ASEAN countries have to do something to upgrade images and perceptions of ASEAN to Koreans without the sort of I think, bilateral cooperation. Only the efforts of Korean government or academics to promote the awareness of ASEAN to Koreans, it's not that enough, because the last experiences of mine tells that, it is quite confined. So I think ASEAN countries should, think about how ASEANs are perceived by Koreans, and give some impulse to Koreans that ASEAN is ASEAN as an organization, or ASEAN countries in general are quite beneficial to Koreans, and their understandings are needed for Koreans for future relations. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Hyung Jun. I think he made the 3 excellent points. Number 1 is, people-to-people relations and exchanges are soaring, but the information sharing is not rapidly, increasing not rapidly enough as we expect. The second point is really important, I think, is importance of mutuality. So I think how much, especially I think we have to confess that how much Korea is really sincerely interested in those ASEAN countries. I think we need to make an effort that, and in return, or on the other hand, ASEAN countries also should make more efforts to get involved actively. And we just finished 5 panelists presentation, and then 2 more, and we need a little bit of speed up because I promised to give floor to ask questions and jump in. So next presenters, Mr. Tran Bit Thai, please.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I would like to thank KNDA for inviting us to join this ASEAN and ROK think tank strategic dialogue for the first time in 2019. And because of time limit, so I will limit my presentations in the following 4 points, and I would like to answer directly the 3rd question that our chair just mentioned. My first point will be about looking back to the past 30 years of ASEAN and ROK relationship. What are the key turning points, and what are the key characteristics of that? From our viewpoint, there are 4 key turning points in the ROK and ASEAN relations. The first turning point is in 1989, when the 2 sides started our sectoral dialogue partnership relations. This is a very important starting point. 2 years later, the second starting point with the 2 sides upgraded it into dialogue partners, the full dialogue partners. And from here, the laying ground task have been finished. Then 2004, ASEAN and ROK issued the joint declaration on comprehensive cooperation partnership. I think starting from here, ROK and ASEAN relations started to go deeper into substance. In 2010, both sides upgraded it into strategic partnership for peace and prosperity. In 2017, the ROK policy, New Southern policy, we consider as a 4th turning point in these relations. And we expect these New Southern policies will contribute more, not only upgrading the relations, but also contributing more substance to these mutually beneficial relations. So looking back to the past 30 years, what are the key characteristics of that? We view them in 4 angles. The first one is that most of the time are laying ground and fast development of the relations. This is very important. The second feature is that ASEAN and ROK relations focusing more on economic development rather than on security and defense. This is the second characteristics. The third one will be that we see a lot of potentials from both sides, especially from ROK side, because of issues on the Korean Peninsula. So a lot of potentials have not yet been released for promoting the relations. And I think this is the big chance for ASEAN and ROK to promote these relations in the future by shifting more resources on defense and security side. And vice versa. ASEAN can do more to contribute to Korean Peninsula's peace and stability, security. The vivid examples are the Singapore Summit and Hanoi Summit. And other countries in ASEAN are also willing to contribute, that's for sure. The fourth features of these relations is that ASEAN and ROK strategic partnership so far is not only mutually beneficial relations, but also one of the most comprehensive and successful external relations of ASEAN. I can assure that, and everybody here can prove that very easily. Look at Vietnam, for example. Even though we set up relations late in 1992, but during the past 27 years, we can see the very fast developing. And now, $100 South Korea invest in ASEAN, 50% are being invested in Vietnam. More and more corporations are coming, like Samsung. They are going to open the third big factory in Vietnam. LG already chose Haiphong. Lotte also are building a lot of hotels and resorts in Hanoi, Da Nang, and Ho Chi Minh cities. So this is very important relations. But we still see more potential can be released in the future. This is the first point I would like to present in my presentations. The second point, I move to key achievements of ASEAN and ROK relations. There are 2 points here. With regard to the foundation of the relationship, we are very happy, not only from Vietnam's angle, but also ASEAN member countries' angle. We see very high level of trust between the two sides. We see no problems at all, no obstacles, big obstacles on every field, from security to defense and developments. And the second is that after 30 years of developments of these relations, both sides have already created quite reasonable, sound basis for the relations to be further developed in the future. South Korea are actively ROK are actively participated in many mechanisms, ASEAN-led mechanisms, like EAS, ARF, or ASEAN +3, and so on and so forth. This is the vivid examples of the institutions that both sides have created. But we need more on dialogue, such as bilateral, on maritime issues, or on non-traditional security threats. With regard to achievements of the two sides, let me remind 2 things, that so far South Korea or ROK did contribute to peace and stability in South Asia regions, like South China Sea issue or other assistance of ROK to ASEAN countries in capacity building in a wide range of issues, such as disaster relief or peacekeeping or something else. On economic cooperation and on developments, ASEAN welcome ROK's assistance in, for example, in Mekong Delta regions. And the most successful initiative so far, from our viewpoint, is the Chiang Mai initiative after the regional financial crisis in 1997. ASEAN and ROK collaborated very effectively under the framework of ASEAN +3 to not only overcome the crisis, but also revamping the financial systems of both sides. This is the key reason why after the crisis in 2008, 2009, ASEAN countries and South Korea can quickly overcome the negative impacts of that crisis. This is very important. Not mentioning trade and investment, I think this is the vivid example of what we have achieved during the process of cooperation. with regard to people to people, the number of ROK citizens visiting Vietnam, visiting ASEAN member countries are increasing sharply. Let me give you an example of Da Nang city. 2 days ago, we landed at Incheon Airport, and we see the boat. 80% of the boat are showing flight connecting destinations of Vietnam and South Korea. Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang, Hải Phòng, Nha Trang, the number of flights even bigger, much bigger than between Vietnam and Beijing, or Vietnam and China, mainland China. So this is a very clear example of how we benefit from these fast developments. Now the third point, let me come back to the 2019 ASEAN and ROK Commemorative Summit. This is very important summit because it's not only looking back at the 30 years of developments of the relations. From ASEAN perspective, the importance or significance of this commemorative summit is threefold. The first one is that it marked the higher level of maturities of relations. And both sides can come up to that with not only signing commemorative documents, but we also work out our joint programs for developments and other documents so that we can benefit from this. For the regions, this will surely contribute to peace and stability and further developments in every angle. And for the global communities, I think the summit will be a good chance for both sides to not only reiterate, re-mentioning of both sides' commitment to multilateralism, but also a chance to show our commitment to upholding rule of law, freedom of navigation, international respect to the basic principles of the international relations that we have benefited during the past 30 years or even beyond that. The last but not least is what we expect from the summit. So we are expecting the commemorative summit not only mention about the joint commitments, but also make new and strong commitments on further deepening ASEAN and ROK relations to contribute to peace, stability, and prosperity of the both sides and of the regions. We will review the summit, of course, we'll review take stock of the achievements of the last 30 years. And of course, we will seek to define key objectives and future directions of the relations. And we will set the long-term vision and joint plan of actions for materializing these commitments and these visions. So we hope the ASEAN Mekong, the first Mekong and ROK summit will produce some more tangible or deliverable for promoting the developments in Mekong regions. And the CEO summit between ASEAN and ROK also provide more networking, more connectivities between business communities between the two sides, and we will see more commitment to promote people-to-people understanding between the two sides. Now, the last, instead of making any conclusions, let me answer the third questions. My chair asked all of the panelists and our ASEAN friends here, what ASEAN wants ROK to do most in the future? 4 points. We want ASEAN, from ASEAN side and from Vietnam side, we expect ROK to do more and make more contributions in capacity building for ASEAN. This is very important, not only in maritime domain, but also in development domain, security and defense domain. We fully realize that ROK still have a lot of potentials in not only in defense, also in others. But because of the South Korean, because of the Korean Peninsula issue, so you have to spend a lot of efforts and resources on this. But new developments and new opportunity in the future may help ROK to redefine your policy line and putting more resources on Southeast Asia, because the connection and connectivity between ROK and Southeast Asia is of utmost importance for futures of the both sides. Second, we expect ROK to support and speak more of rule-based orders, to support ASEAN's community building process, ASEAN comprehensive connectivity plans, and speak of ASEAN freedom of navigation, and so on. This is very important. The more vocal, the better. The last but not least, that the next one is on Mekong. Mekong will be new fronts. Not only South China Sea, but the next one will be Mekong issue and non-traditional security threats. Cyber, water security, and diversity, biodiversity. This is very important. And shift more resources to defense and security. This is the fourth one. So thank you so much. I stop here, and I am happy to answer or to entertain all of you with question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chun Viet Thai. He touched so many issues, so I don't know how to summarize, but he talked about the historical point, turning point between the ASEAN and Korea. He talked a lot about the characteristics of the relationship, and and I actually one point is really impressed me was we should expand the level from economic and to strategic issues, and he also actually recommend or ask us to do four things, not instead of one thing I asked. And among them, I think it's really important about emphasizing rule-based orders. So we need to speak more about, and actually that's my argument. And whenever I involved in this kind of seminar, these days big countries actually violating or somehow distorting rules like freedom of navigation and free trade and the sovereignty issues and things like that. I think we should get together to talk about and repeatedly about the principles and rules and they can promote cooperation among nations rather than the struggle and conflict. Thank you very much. And the last but not the least, and the only lady presenters, and Ms. Kasira CHEEPPENSOOK, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Your Excellencies, fellow academics, distinguished guests, I wish to sincerely thank the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy for organizing the 2019 ASEAN-ROK Think Tank Strategic Dialogue. It's really my great pleasure to be here. They're both peril and promise of being the last speaker in a panel full of excellent speakers. The peril is like most of the good points would already be covered, but the promise is that because of that, I could afford to be brief, so bear with me. My contribution here, I guess, is that I'll talk a bit about how Korea and ASEAN can build on their complementaries or synergies to really get down to the ground and work together. So the ROK's new Southern policy has expressed shared vision with ASEAN, people-centered community of peace and prosperity, with the emphasis on human capital development, such as training, to improve efficiency and good governance, people-to-people exchange, and the area that really needs more attention and development is the rights of overseas inhabitants and migrant workers as well. Both sides, so I think, need to really reflect upon the plan of action to implement the joint declaration on ASEAN-ROK strategic Partnership for Peace and Prosperity 2016 to 2020. Since the joint declaration also has contributions towards ASEAN Vision 2025. The commemorative summit should mark the synergies that the ROK could further support, such as the impact narrowing the development gap in the Initiative for ASEAN Integration, or the AI, and the implications from the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP. The main areas in the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific could also serve as main priorities in the ROK-ASEAN cooperation, such as maritime cooperation, connectivity, and sustainable development goals. And I agree with my fellow panelists as well that Mekong sub-region should remain an important cornerstone in ASEAN-ROK cooperation through mechanisms such as Mekong-ROK Foreign Ministers Meeting, the Mekong-ROK Business Forum, and the Mekong-Korea Summit, for example. While ASEAN could play a stabilizing role in the Korean Peninsula, as could be elaborated further in Session 2, ROK-ASEAN Cooperation toward Regional Prosperity and Peace, later on today, the ROK could also play a stabilizing role in the issue that had divisive impact on ASEAN before, such as the South China Sea or the SCS. The ROK has undeniable interest, I think, in the SCS, which could not be ignored, such as the freedom of navigation and overflight. So the issue of maritime security is of mutual significance to the cooperation between ASEAN and the ROK, where both sides put emphasis on rules of law and international legal principles enshrined in the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Other issues in maritime conservation, such as maritime debris management as well as blue carbon, can also be areas of cooperation in order for the SAS to remain an area of peace and prosperity. Apart from contributing to multilateralism and peaceful settlement of disputes, Korean engagement with ASEAN helps sustain the norms that unilateralism is undesirable in the region, I think, and will not contribute to peace and prosperity, as we can see from past actions. Moreover, any sustainable cooperation has to have a strong shared value and normative foundation. And one of the mechanisms that could support learning and socializing process, such as rules of law and good governance, is the exchange through the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, or AIPA. This has contributing effects for the strengthening of ASEAN community, since community building also needs support from the legislatures in ASEAN. The ROK's experiences in this regard could help with the transfer of knowledge and joint workshop to bolster ASEAN's efforts towards community building. On development areas, I'd like to emphasize on the role of the ASEAN-ROK Cooperation Fund roles. There should be enhancements in this regards in transferring development experiences towards the Sustainable Development Goals. ASEAN, under the Thai chairmanship, aim to establish the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue, or the ACSDSD, whereas ASEAN has strong commitment towards enhancing complementarities between the ASEAN Vision 2025 and the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development already. The areas that receive the most funding from the ASEAN-ROK Cooperation Fund seem to be people-to-people exchanges. Nonetheless, other areas that receive less funding comparatively could also further the collaboration, such as sport, information, and communication technology, and of course, women issues. ASEAN has already launched the ASEAN Center of Military Medicine, the ACMM, which aims to support disaster relief operations. This could also gain support from the ROK, given that the idea was proposed within the framework of ADMM+. Enhancing emergency responses together with the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management, or the AHA Center, is crucial for disaster management in the region, including the search and rescue operation. ASEAN could really strengthen the cooperation with the ROK in terms of community resilience and preparedness education in schools. So not only providing relief for disaster, which is one side of the issue, but also preparedness. Young students should really know what they need to do to survive in case of disaster. And last but not least, the public diplomacy. Trust and shared understanding, including mutual friendly relations, can be sustained by continuous engagement with the government with the public. So the communication is key. This could also contribute towards cultural tourism and other forms of cultural exchanges. Under the Thai chairmanship, ASEAN Cultural Year 2019 was announced with the aim to promote appreciation for ASEAN culture, respect for diversity, and a greater sense of ASEAN identity, as well as promote ASEAN culture internationally as a driver for creative industries. So events such as the ASEAN Week 2019, organized by the ASEAN-Korea Center, which showcased different aspects of culture from both sides, such as music and fashion, could really contribute towards cultural awareness between the partners as well. So we really hope that the ASEAN and the ROK could build on this strong foundation of friendship and trust and take into account our thoughts from this dialogue for the 2019 ASEAN-ROK Commemorative Summit. You have a new ASEAN chair by then because Thailand would hand over its chairmanship. But we really hope some of these points should prevail. My Korean friend told me once there's a Korean proverb, I mean, you can correct me if I quote it wrong, but the proverb is, if you live together, it's better, even if it's only a sheet of paper. So I think even if it's just a shared statement or a joint declaration, it's always better if it's a joint effort. So really hope for this between ASEAN and ROK in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kasira CHEEPPENSOOK. And she talked about diverse areas Korea and ASEAN can expand the cooperation. And one thing is really interesting point is to sustain this kind of relations, strong sense of identity sharing is important. I think this is same context with my statement, about we both sharing the common values and principles. And also she talked about importance of public diplomacy. We all finished the 7 excellent presentations. I thought we have a lot of time, but we have 10 minutes. So before I can get answers from panelists about 3 questions, because we don't have time, I want to, about just listing don't provide explanations. So we kind of throwing out all the menus for coming sessions. Before that, I want to keep the promise that I can give you 2 or 3 persons to raise questions or comments.
First of all, thank you so much for the insightful presentation. I'm Do Thi Thanh Hao from Vietnam, and I'm doing my master's degree in Seoul National University. So, of several challenges that ASEAN member countries are facing, I do believe that digitalization is one of can be of great concerns in the region. So given the size of GDP as well as population, I do believe that digital economy in ASEAN still lag behind compared to other major economies. So I just want to hear from you what should be the reason behind this, and what role South Korea can play to help ASEAN member states to create a strong and inclusive digital economies, because I do believe that this is kind of trade-off collaboration. Thank you.
Yeah, she raised the issue of lagging digital connectivity, digital cooperation between ROK and ASEAN. You specify somebody or voluntary base?
Yes, I do want the first presenter to answer my question because he.
So I think Mr. Rastam MOHD ISA. You're the one.
Thank you very much. Yes, we all want to be part of the digital world, the digital economy, and so on. In fact, I think the digital economy is the economy now in many cases, in many instances. There are countries that are going cashless. There are banks are also discouraging people from using checks and so on and so forth. But anyway, the problem of digitalization or the development of the digital economy in ASEAN, I think it also boils down to one, infrastructure. So as it relates to connectivity and so on, because you have to develop the infrastructure in order to get things moving. The other is, of course, the involvement of the regulators must not constrain businesses from moving into digital economy. I give you an example. In Malaysia, for example, for a long time, e-hailing for services were not encouraged. And unlike in Indonesia, for example, the use of e-hailing applications for motorcycles have been going on for a number of years. In Malaysia, we're just debating it now, whether it should be permitted or not. Now, the other thing is, I think encouraging the development of businesses, startups, and so on, encouraging the young people, millennials, and so on, to be involved in this. This is where, of course, ASEAN can get the help and assistance and support from Korea. And I think in this case, it is largely the businesses, investments by the technology companies that would be helpful and crucial in this case. Thank you.
I think you raised a very important question. One of the focuses on which Korea and ASEAN's cooperation is placed on is how to help narrow down the development gaps, including the digital gap. So in terms of the enhancement of connectivity, I think Korea's contribution to alleviate the developmental gaps and narrow down the digitalization gap is very important. I think we are very much, mindful, and that is also an area where Korea and ASEAN cooperation will continue to make a big difference. So I would say that our policy focus vis-a-vis ASEAN and the Mekong region is geared up for helping ASEAN and the Mekong region to help address the digital gaps. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your speech. It was quite interesting. And I am a student of Yonsei University, Kiwan Kim, and Professor Kim Hyung Jun has pointed out that common people are not so interested in ASEAN, so there are some obstacles in raising interest of common citizens. And me, as being a common student, I'm not also much interested in ASEAN, to be honest. But could you tell me, please, are there some policies or ways to raise interest of common citizens, as the interest of common citizens is not less important than other things? And as you all have told, Korea-ASEAN relations are quite important. So I would like any of Korean panelists tell how to raise the interest of ASEAN. Yeah.
I think Professor Kim Hyung Jun, yeah.
Yes, I have tried to find out the ways to promote awareness of ASEAN in Korean society, but it is really difficult. And as I said before, I just need some assistance from ASEAN countries to promote ASEAN to Koreans. For example, I'm not sure whether delegates from ASEAN countries know there's some ASEAN Cultural Center in Korea, not in Seoul, but in Busan. We have ASEAN, something like Cultural Center, but it is managed by Koreans. Actually, it is funded by Korean government. So there are so many restrictions. The passions of Koreans to promote ASEAN is actually, it is quite limited. So in that sense, I think ASEAN now think seriously about helping Koreans to know more about ASEAN countries. So that's the general one, and I cannot actually find out more specific ways to upgrade our understanding, Koreans' understanding of ASEAN. I'm trying to. Yeah, thank you.
Responding to your question, I think it's very important for Korea and ASEAN to undertake a variety of outreach targeting, many different stakeholders, including students across the country. And actually, ASEAN-Korea Center has been engaged in doing, those outreach activities. So overall, I believe the level of awareness of ASEAN here in Korean society has considerably increased, even if the increase may not meet your expectation, but it will continue. And also, I believe that the two monumental summits we will have at the end of November will contribute a lot to raise the awareness of ASEAN's importance among the Koreans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I have to cancel the session that I can hear from all three questions I raised. I think I will just throw to the next sessions and the menu for your thinking. And before I end this, I want to make 2 points. Number one is, President Moon actually even not is halfway, only halfway. He visited 10 countries, and then we are expecting successful summit meeting in next month. Yeah, some cynicism out there, as I said, but I think it's sincerity that he has, and sincerity our government has, I think needs your support. The second part is, I think it's relationship, especially human relationship, is very natural. Sometimes you don't need to force it. It's, visiting places and trip is a very voluntary basis. It's not really forced. And even Korea K-pop is a natural. So sometimes government can be a breaker or a decelerator. So I think government and intellectuals and experts kind of sometimes help behind this wave, not lead this kind of a wave. I think we should keep that in mind. I think we had a great session and great presentation, except for my poor management of time. And lunches will be served soon. And bon appetit. Thank you very much.